In the summer of 1590, a small English ship pushed through the choppy waters of the Atlantic, drawing closer to a silent, forested shoreline. Standing at the edge of the deck was a man named John White, weary, weathered, but filled with hope. He hadn't seen this place in 3 years, not since he'd left behind 115 souls, men, women, and children, clinging to a dream of survival in the New World. Among them, his daughter, Eleanor, and his newborn granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born on American soil. He had promised them he'd return soon. He had no idea how long fate would keep him away. Now, 3 years later, John White had finally returned. But as the ship approached the shore of Roanoke Island, something was wrong. There was no smoke rising from chimneys, no figures moving along the coast, no shouts of welcome, only silence. He stepped ashore, heart pounding, boots sinking into the damp earth of what was once a bustling colony. He expected hugs, voices, laughter. But the settlement was gone. Houses dismantled, gardens overgrown, not a single human in sight, not even a grave, no signs of battle, no bodies, no blood, just emptiness. And then, carved into a weathered wooden post, just one word, CROATOAN. No explanation, no farewell note, no map, no trail, just that one cryptic word. What did it mean? Had they moved? Had they been taken? Had something worse happened? White clung to hope. He believed the word was a message, that they had relocated to CROATOAN Island, home to a nearby friendly tribe. He begged his crew to sail there, to search for any trace of the colony, of his family. But storms swept through the coast with violent force. The ship was damaged, supplies ran low. He was forced to turn back, leaving the mystery behind. He would never see his daughter again, never hold his granddaughter, never know what truly happened, and neither would anyone else. To this day, more than 400 years later, the fate of the Lost Colony of Roanoke remains one of the oldest unsolved mysteries in American history. A thriving settlement, vanished, no answers, no closure, just 115 names, and a carved word in wood. What happened to them? Was it survival or slaughter? Did they leave willingly, or were they taken? This isn't just a story of a missing colony. It's a story about hope, fear, and a silence that has echoed through the centuries. And the deeper you look, the stranger it becomes. The race for the New World was fierce. Spain had already claimed gold and glory in the Americas. France was carving out colonies of its own. But England? It was late to the game, and Queen Elizabeth I wasn't about to be left behind. She envisioned more than conquest. She wanted a legacy, a permanent English presence across the sea, a place to rival Spain's power, and expand England's reach forever. But colonization didn't begin with kings or armies. It began with a man, Sir Walter Raleigh. Explorer, poet, court favorite of the Queen, charming, daring, and hungry for greatness. In 1584, Raleigh was granted a royal patent, permission to claim land for the crown in the New World. He named the territory Virginia, in honor of the Virgin Queen herself. His plan? To establish a series of colonies along the eastern coast of North America, a base for trade, military advantage, and endless riches. But what followed were not triumphs, but trials. The first expedition, in 1585, was purely military. A small group of Englishmen landed on Roanoke Island, an isolated marshy strip of land nestled along what is now North Carolina's coast. They built a fort. They traded cautiously with local tribes. But tensions rose quickly. Supplies ran low. The environment turned hostile. And within a year, the colonists abandoned the outpost and returned to England. Still, Raleigh persisted. In 1586, a second attempt was made, a small resupply mission. But when they arrived, the outpost was already deserted. The new arrivals tried to rebuild, but once again they vanished, lost to hunger, conflict, or the wilderness itself. 2 failures, no survivors, and yet, Raleigh was undeterred. In 1587, he proposed a bold new idea. Not soldiers this time, but families. Men, women, children. A civilian colony, permanent, peaceful, self-sufficient. To lead this historic third voyage, Raleigh chose someone he trusted, John White. White wasn't a soldier or politician. He was an artist, a skilled cartographer who had traveled with previous expeditions. He had mapped coastlines, sketched native peoples, and chronicled the unknown. But now, he would be more than an observer. He would be governor of England's first true settlement in the New World. White gathered a group of 115 settlers. Among them, his own daughter, Eleanor Dare, pregnant with her first child. Her husband Ananias would accompany her. This wasn't just a mission. It was a family legacy. They set sail in May of 1587, a fleet of 3 ships braving the Atlantic, chasing a dream. Their destination, Chesapeake Bay, a more promising location than the cursed soil of Roanoke. But something went wrong. When they reached Roanoke to check on the remains of the former fort, the ship's captain refused to sail farther. He left the settlers stranded, forcing them to rebuild their lives on the very island that had already swallowed 2 groups before them. Still, they tried. They built homes, cleared land, sought peace with the nearby tribes, and in August of that same year, a child was born. Virginia Dare, the first English child ever born in America, a symbol of hope, and the first to vanish. But the colony was in trouble. Tensions with the natives escalated. Food grew scarce. Winter loomed, and once again, John White would have to leave, sailing back to England for supplies. He promised to return quickly. He had no idea he wouldn't see his family, or the colony, ever again. In the spring of 1587, 3 ships cut across the gray Atlantic, battered by wind, driven by hope. Aboard them were 115 passengers, not soldiers or explorers this time, but settlers, men, women, children, entire families bound for a new life in the wilderness of America. At their head stood John White, the newly appointed governor. He wasn't a warrior, but a man of vision, a skilled artist, a chronicler of discovery, now tasked with protecting lives. He was also a father, and soon to be a grandfather. His pregnant daughter, Eleanor Dare, traveled with her husband Ananias. Their unborn child, still nameless, would become the first English baby born in the New World. The journey was long and uncertain. The Atlantic, as always, was merciless. Storms battered the sails. Provisions spoiled. Morale flickered like a dying lantern. But in July, the settlers sighted land. Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina. It wasn't their intended destination. The original plan was to settle in Chesapeake Bay, where the land was more fertile and the terrain less isolated. But then, betrayal. The fleet's commander, Simon Fernandez, refused to take them further. He ordered the settlers to disembark at Roanoke, the very site where 2 previous colonies had failed. Why? Some say it was a power play. Others believe Fernandez had his own agenda. Whatever the reason, the settlers had no choice. They unloaded their supplies and walked onto an island already steeped in bad luck. The remnants of the previous colony were there. Rotting wood, broken fences, tools half buried in sand. It was eerie, quiet, unwelcoming. But they rebuilt, determined to make this new home their own. In the early weeks, they worked tirelessly. Homes were constructed, gardens planted, and on August 18, 1587, Eleanor gave birth to a healthy baby girl. They named her Virginia Dare, the first English child born on American soil. For a brief moment, there was joy, a symbol of beginning, a sign of hope. But hope fades quickly when hunger sets in. The land was harsh. Food was limited. Trade with the nearby Native American tribes was tense. At first, the settlers approached cautiously, hoping for peace. But memories of the past lingered. The English had previously attacked native villages. Revenge still burned beneath the surface. One of the local tribes, the CROATOAN, had suffered from earlier English aggression. Now, with families settling on their land again, resentment grew. Small skirmishes erupted. Supplies disappeared. People went missing. The settlers were surrounded by towering forests, but also by silence, uncertainty, suspicion, fear. It became clear. They could not survive alone. They needed help. They needed England. And so, in a decision heavy with dread, John White prepared to return across the ocean. Back to Queen Elizabeth's court. Back to a country on the brink of war. He promised his daughter he would come back swiftly, before winter set in. He would bring food, weapons, tools, reinforcements. He kissed his granddaughter goodbye. She was just days old. He would never see her again. As the ship pulled away, the settlers watched from the shore, tiny figures surrounded by towering trees and secrets yet to unfold. What they didn't know was that their time was already running out. And what the world didn't know was that this would be the last time anyone would ever see the Roanoke colony alive. The sun beat down on Roanoke Island, but it gave no warmth. Within weeks of John White's departure, the settlers felt it, a slow, creeping dread settling over the land. The crops they had planted, corn, beans, squash, failed to grow in the sandy, infertile soil. Fishing yields were unpredictable. Hunting proved difficult in unfamiliar terrain. Food dwindled. They had hoped for peace with the local tribes, but history cast a long, bitter shadow. Just a few years before, English explorers had raided nearby villages, taken food, burned homes, killed leaders. Now those same tribes looked upon the settlers with wary eyes. Old wounds had not healed, and the sight of Englishmen building on their land again felt like a threat, not a promise. Tensions mounted. At first there were quiet refusals. A trade declined, a warning look, a missing bundle of fish. Then came disappearances. A man who went into the woods and never returned. A child who wandered too far from the fort. The settlers began to suspect they were being watched. Every rustling leaf became a threat. Every shadow a hunter. Desperation set in. They had tools, but no food. They had shelter, but no safety. And worst of all, they had no word from England. They lit fires, carved signals into trees, prayed that John White would return soon. But days became weeks. Weeks became months. Still, nothing. Back across the ocean, White had reached England, only to find a nation bracing for war. It was 1588, and the Spanish Armada loomed on the horizon. England needed every ship. No vessel could be spared for a colonial resupply mission, not even one carrying the hopes of 115 souls. John White begged. He petitioned Queen Elizabeth's advisors. He pleaded with private ship owners. But the answer was always the same. Not now. Not yet. Wait. Time passed. White watched helplessly as the calendar turned, again and again. His heart lived on the other side of the sea. His daughter, his granddaughter, an entire colony waiting, or perhaps not waiting anymore. He finally secured passage on a private expedition, but it was attacked by pirates. The ship was damaged, the mission abandoned. By the time John White was able to secure another vessel, it was 1590. 3 years had passed. 3 years of silence. 3 years of hunger. 3 years of fear in the forests of Roanoke. He sailed as fast as the winds would carry him, driven not just by duty, but by love, by the aching knowledge that every hour might be too late. When he reached the coast of North Carolina, the island was eerily still. The shoreline looked the same, but the people were gone. The fort had been dismantled. Vegetation had reclaimed the paths. No graves, no bones, no sign of life. Only one thing remained. A single word, carved into a wooden post near the edge of the settlement. CROATOAN. There was no cross. The agreed-upon distress signal if the colony had been forced to flee. No signs of violence, no destruction. Just that one word. White believed it meant the colonists had moved to CROATOAN Island, home of a friendly tribe. He begged the crew to search there. But fate intervened again. Storms rolled in. Supplies ran low. The ship was forced to turn back, and White, left forever in the dark. He would never learn what became of his family, and the world would never hear from Roanoke again. The year was 1590. 3 years had passed since John White last saw Roanoke, or the people he loved. The Atlantic winds were colder now. His beard was gray. The world he returned to no longer felt familiar. And the world he had left behind might not exist at all. As the ship neared the coast of Roanoke Island, White stood at the bow, scanning the shoreline. He had imagined this moment for 1,000 sleepless nights. In his mind, he saw his daughter running to greet him. He heard Virginia Dare's laughter echoing through the trees. He pictured the colony alive, weathered but enduring. But what lay ahead was not what he expected. The beach was empty. No welcoming fires, no waving hands, no signs of movement, just wind and silence. He stepped ashore, his boots sinking into the familiar sand, now touched by time. The overgrowth was thick. The once cleared paths were now veiled in vines and silence, and where the settlement had stood was nothing. The homes had been taken apart, not burned, not destroyed, but carefully dismantled. Fences were gone. Gardens were wild. No tools, no barrels, no signs of a struggle. Just a few stray remnants, a rusted hinge, a broken pot, a rotting plank. And then, on the edge of the clearing, carved deep into the grain of a weather-worn post, he saw it. CROATOAN. One word, no dates, no initials, no signatures, just a word, and a mystery. It was a name he recognized, CROATOAN Island, about 50 miles south, home to a friendly Native American tribe who had once welcomed the English. Had the settlers gone there? Had they been invited or taken? Were they alive? Or was this word a whisper left behind by the dead? White clung to hope. There was no cross carved beneath the word, the sign they'd agreed to use if danger had forced them to flee. Perhaps they had left willingly. Perhaps he could still find them. He turned to his crew. They would set sail again, south to CROATOAN, to search for survivors. But the sea had other plans. A violent storm churned in from the horizon, fast, dark, and merciless. The ship's captain, low on supplies and fearing damage, refused to risk another voyage. They were forced to leave. White was once again pulled away, this time for good. He returned to England broken, not just from the long journey, but from something deeper, the unknown. He would never find his daughter, never hear Virginia's voice, never know what happened to the people he was supposed to protect. Roanoke had become more than a failure. It had become a void, a colony erased, not by war or disaster, but by silence. No bodies, no letters, no answers, just one word, carved in wood and carved in history. The remains of the Roanoke colony were few, but they whispered. John White searched every corner of the island for something, anything, that could explain what had happened during the 3 years he'd been away. But the land told no story. There were no bones, no graves, no charred ruins. The settlement hadn't been destroyed. It had been taken apart methodically. Houses were dismantled, not demolished. Fences and tools had been moved or removed, not left in haste. It looked less like a massacre and more like an organized departure. But why? Why would 115 people, families, children, even newborn Virginia dare vanish into the wilderness without leaving a single note, a farewell message, a sign of what went wrong? And then there was that one word, CROATOAN. It wasn't random. It was the name of a nearby island, part of the Outer Banks, some 50 miles to the south. It was also the name of a Native American tribe known to be friendly to the English. White had visited them during previous expeditions. They had traded together, communicated, even welcomed the English into their lands, at least once. Could it be that the colonists had sought refuge there? That they had left Roanoke willingly to escape hunger or conflict? It seemed possible, even likely. But there were problems. There was no cross carved beneath the word, the agreed-upon sign if the settlers were forced to flee. Its absence suggested the move had not been an act of desperation. But was it truly voluntary? Could a group of more than 100 people have integrated into a native community without leaving more traces? Some believed the settlers may have intermarried with the CROATOAN. Others thought they could have been absorbed for protection, becoming part of a tribe to survive. If so, their descendants might still live, hidden in history, their names forgotten, their bloodlines disguised. John White clung to that theory. To him, the word was not a tombstone. It was a direction, a lifeline. He begged the crew to sail south to CROATOAN Island. Just one more day, just one chance to find them. But nature, once again, stood in the way. The sky darkened. Winds howled through the rigging. A violent storm rolled over the Atlantic, forcing the sailors to retreat. The captain refused to risk the ship. They were low on food. The hull was worn. Morale was crumbling. And so, just like that, the search was over before it began. White was taken back to England, devastated. Not by death, but by not knowing. The one word they had, CROATOAN, remained an enigma. Was it a signal or a trap? A place of safety or the last thing the settlers ever saw? For centuries, that word has haunted historians. It is the only real clue we have. A single carved fragment of a story we may never fully recover. Roanoke did not vanish in a blaze or a war. It faded quietly, intelligently, almost intentionally. No final letter, no collapsing walls, only whispers between the trees, and a name carved into weathered wood, CROATOAN, a word that means everything and tells us nothing. The Lost Colony of Roanoke is one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. No evidence of death, no trail of escape, no cries for help. Just 115 people who vanished without explanation, and one word carved in wood. But while the silence from Roanoke has endured for over 4 centuries, the speculation has never stopped. Historians, archaeologists, and even conspiracy theorists have offered theories, some grounded in fact, others born of fear or imagination. Let's explore them. Top 1. Assimilation with the CROATOAN tribe. This is perhaps the most widely accepted theory, and in many ways, the most hopeful. The CROATOAN were a Native American tribe living on Hatteras Island, not far from Roanoke. They had previously shown a willingness to trade and communicate with the English. It's believed that when supplies dwindled and John White failed to return, the colonists may have simply abandoned the settlement and sought help from the only people who knew how to survive: the land. There are historical accounts, decades later, of settlers encountering Native Americans with gray eyes, lighter skin, and European features. Some even claim to find English-style homes and iron tools among the CROATOAN. And then there's the word CROATOAN, carved at the colony site. It could have been a message, a deliberate clue left for White. But if the colonists did assimilate, Why was no contact ever made again? Why did no one return with news, letters, or proof? Some believe they were simply absorbed into tribal life, changed by it, protected by it, and eventually erased by time. It is the quietest of the theories, and perhaps the most peaceful. 2. Spanish attack. In the 1580s, England and Spain were at war. The Spanish Armada loomed over Europe, and the New World was a contested prize. Roanoke, a small English outpost on Spanish-claimed territory, could have been seen as a threat and an easy target. Some historians suggest that Spanish forces sailing up from Florida may have discovered and destroyed the colony. But this theory struggles under scrutiny. There are no signs of violence at the Roanoke site. No weapons, no burned buildings, no remains. Spanish records, usually meticulous, make no mention of such an attack. If the colony had been wiped out by Spain, it left behind a strangely invisible battlefield. Acre 3. Disease, starvation, and collapsed life on Roanoke Island was hard. The soil was poor, the weather was brutal. Relations with nearby tribes were unpredictable. The settlers may have simply run out of options. Starvation and disease could have taken hold. The healthy may have tried to escape into the wilderness. Small groups might have gone in different directions, hoping for a better life elsewhere. The colony, in this theory, did not disappear all at once, but rather dissolved slowly. One person, one family at a time. But again, no graves, no journals, no evidence. It's a theory that explains the silence, but not the clean, methodical disappearance. 4. Cannibalism and internal collapse. One of the darker theories, rarely discussed in classrooms, suggests that the colony may have turned against itself. Extreme hunger, isolation, paranoia. These conditions have led to unthinkable acts in history before, such as the Donner Party, centuries later. If Roanoke faced a harsh winter with no supplies and no rescue, could they have resorted to cannibalism? Could infighting, desperation, or betrayal have triggered chaos and a mass death hidden in the woods? But this theory, like many others, lacks one thing: physical evidence. No bones, no signs of struggle, just that haunting emptiness. 5. Paranormal and fringe theories. Some mysteries are too strange to escape myth. The story of Roanoke has inspired supernatural theories, that the colonists were taken by some force beyond understanding. Some claim they were victims of a curse, perhaps rooted in disturbed native land. Others whisper about portals, spirits, or even alien abduction. And then there's the odd detail that decades later, another group of colonists tried to settle near Roanoke, only to experience bizarre disappearances and unexplained sightings themselves. These theories are easy to dismiss, but difficult to forget. Because when reason fails to explain the impossible, imagination fills the void. Each of these theories holds pieces of truth, but none hold it all. And maybe that's what keeps the mystery alive. The fact that the colony wasn't just lost, it was erased. No final letter, no broken wall, just a word carved in wood, and 115 ghosts the world never saw again. Some say they lived on, some say they died, some say they're still whispering, deep in the Carolina woods. Centuries may have passed since the last voices fell silent on Roanoke Island, but the mystery of the lost colony is far from buried. In the age of satellites and science, historians and archaeologists have turned from speculation to hard evidence, digging not just through dirt, but through time. And the land has slowly begun to whisper back. For decades, teams of researchers have focused their efforts on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, searching for artifacts, clues, and even human remains that might shed light on what happened after John White's final, heartbreaking visit in 1590. And some of what they've found is remarkable. Digging into the past. On Hatteras Island, once known as CROATOAN, excavations have uncovered European-style artifacts, some dating back to the late 1500s. brass pieces from sword hilts, parts of a flintlock gun, fragments of English pottery found deep beneath native village sites. These weren't dropped by random travelers. They were used, repurposed, lived with. And that suggests a powerful possibility that some members of the Roanoke colony did survive, and they may have integrated with the CROATOAN people, just as the most likely theory has long proposed. Archaeologist Scott Dawson, working with the First Colony Foundation, has spent years unearthing evidence to support this idea. According to Dawson, the findings show a blending of cultures, not just artifacts left behind. English goods appear interwoven with native life, not looted, not discarded, but adopted. This lends significant weight to the assimilation theory, that the colonists didn't disappear, they became someone else. Genetic echoes. Meanwhile, modern science has turned its attention to DNA. Could the genetic fingerprints of the lost colony still exist in people alive today? Researchers have collected DNA samples from local Native American tribes and families in the Carolinas who claim descent from both Native and English ancestors. It's a delicate process, not just technically, but culturally. The oral histories of these communities are rich and often sacred, passed down through generations. Some speak of white ancestors who arrived in crisis. Others tell of children with gray eyes, of names that sounded strange but familiar. So far, no definitive genetic match has been found, but the work continues. Piece by piece, strand by strand. X marks the spot. In 2012, researchers made an astonishing discovery hiding in plain sight. On a 16th century map drawn by John White himself, conservators at the British Museum found a small patch covering part of the coastline near the Albemarle Sound. Others tell of children with gray eyes, of names that sounded strange but familiar. So far, no definitive genetic match has been found, but the work continues. Piece by piece, strand by strand. X marks the spot. In 2012, researchers made an astonishing discovery hiding in plain sight. On a 16th century map drawn by John White himself, conservators at the British Museum found a small patch covering part of the coastline near the Albemarle Sound. No journal has ever surfaced. No bones conclusively tied to the colonists have been found. The truth, if it still exists, is fragmented, scattered across islands, buried under centuries, whispered in bloodlines and stories. We know more now than ever before, but the answers remain just out of reach. Maybe they always will. Because Roanoke was not just a colony. It was a moment, a flicker of ambition, fear, and hope set loose in an unknown world. And sometimes, history doesn't leave a clean record. Sometimes, it leaves only shadows, and the determination to follow them. We live in a world built on answers. We search, we measure, we document. We want to believe that everything, every mystery, every shadow, can eventually be explained. But sometimes, history doesn't leave us answers. Sometimes, it only leaves echoes. The story of Roanoke is one such echo, a colony that began with hope and ambition, and ended in silence. No battles, no letters, no graves, just a vanished people, a single carved word, and a question that has lasted more than 4 centuries. What happened to them? Were they welcomed into the arms of a native tribe and given a second chance at life? Did they scatter into the forest, trying to survive one brutal winter too many? Did they perish quietly, one by one, under a sky that never gave them rain? Or did something stranger happen, something we've never been able to comprehend? We may never know. But their story endures, not because it was solved, but because it wasn't. Because John White never found his daughter. Because a baby named Virginia Dare became a symbol not of a beginning, but of an absence. Because the land where they once stood was overtaken by vines, storms, and time, and all that was left was CROATOAN. That word has become more than a clue. It's become a ghost. It drifts through textbooks, through legends, through the wind that still howls through the Outer Banks. A name that speaks not of where they went, but of how far they are from being forgotten. The settlers of Roanoke didn't write their ending, but they became a part of something bigger, something mythic. They remind us that the past is not a straight line. It is a fog, a forest, a shore you can walk along forever and still not reach the truth. And maybe that's the point. Because in their mystery, there is a strange kind of immortality. They may be lost, but they are not gone. They live on in every searchlight cast across a weathered map, in every spade of dirt dug in the Carolinas, in every child who hears the name Virginia Dare and asks, what happened to her? The Lost Colony never sent a message, but they left us something deeper, the knowledge that not all things must be known, to be remembered. So we listen, we wonder, and we walk the shores of Roanoke Island, where the sea keeps its secrets, and the wind still whispers a name carved in wood, a whisper from the past.